This video will openly discuss spoilers for Echoes of Wisdom, so if you haven't completed the game yet and you don't want anything spoiled, come back to this video after you've finished it, and I hope you enjoyed the video. Why do you like Zelda? What aspect of this series scratches that itch that you don't get with other games? It's an important question because it's been a topic of discussion really since Breath of the Wild's release. Especially with Tears of the Kingdom, the direction for a lot of fans deviated way too much from the traditional norms and made them feel as though it's not a legitimate Zelda title. So when talking about Echoes of Wisdom, I think it's important to know what you want out of a Zelda game. With the modern titles allowing player freedom to cultivate unique and groundbreaking gameplay, and the traditional, more curated linearity of the classic games, there's two distinct formulas for Zelda. Two philosophies that are at their core in opposition of each other. There's been a few titles that attempt to bridge that divide, but none so more successfully than Echoes of Wisdom. Echoes of Wisdom near perfectly provides a linear experience through open-ended gameplay. The added structure allowed for improvements to the game's story, as well as giving newer fans of the series a look into what traditional Zelda games look like. But it approaches it through a modern lens, allowing for that wholly unique gameplay experience that we've come to expect now from Zelda. The result is a fun, engaging, narrative-focused title that still provides plenty of individualism and an array of solutions to any given problem. This blend of old and new, in my eyes, is exactly what I want out of a Zelda game. Echoes of Wisdom's design is built upon the foundation of what made classic Zelda fans fall in love with the series and gave players the creative freedom to solve puzzles and explore what fans of the later entries have come to love and expect. The result is a game that should appeal to anyone who enjoys The Legend of Zelda. Let's look at how Grezzo and Nintendo pulled this off. Echoes of Wisdom's story is a true return to form for the series. While it is Zelda's turn to take up the old sword and shield this time around, the troubles plaguing Hyrule are still there and it's up to her to save the kingdom. Strange rifts have appeared all over Hyrule after the defeat of Ganon. These rifts suck in everything and everyone they come across, leaving a torn, distorted area in their wake. Zelda relays this information back to her father, the King of Hyrule, and his advisors, but they too become victims of the rifts. But the rifts create evil imposter echoes of the people it absorbs, the king and his aides included. They falsely accuse Zelda of being responsible for the rifts and have her imprisoned. It's here in the dungeon where Zelda meets Tri, an ethereal being that grants her the Tri-Rod, a special weapon that creates echoes of items and monsters that Zelda comes across. Together, the two are tasked with investigating the rifts across Hyrule and saving the kingdom and its inhabitants from them. Echoes of Wisdom has Zelda traverse across all the regions of Hyrule to clear the rifts. Initially, Zelda must take on the Southern Ruins, the first and tutorial stage dungeon. This dungeon did a great job of introducing the mechanics in a well-paced and understandable way while creating exciting set-piece fights with the imposter Link and a staple modern Zelda enemy, a Talus. Upon the completion of Southern Ruins, the world opens up a little bit. Much like in Tears of the Kingdom, you're able to choose your next destination between Jabul Waters and Gerudo Desert. The game follows this format after saving those areas by having you return to Hyrule Castle and cleansing it, revealing the true entity behind the rifts and the next set of dungeons you need to complete. Echoes of Wisdom follows the traditional Zelda narrative of the Triforce Bearers returning. This time, Zelda takes on the title of Priestess and is tasked with discovering what Echoes calls the Prime Energy, aka the Triforce. It is interesting that they decided to change the terminology for the Triforce when this game so heavily leans into past lore. I guess this was their way of setting this game apart and as its own thing. The Faron, Eldin, and Lanayru regions are the three regions connected to the goddesses, and she must cleanse these regions and seek favor from them. Only then will she be able to obtain the power of the Prime Energy and defeat the evil known as Null. Null is a primordial being that existed before the creation of Hyrule. Null thrived in the void that was before existence, and the three golden goddesses created the land of Hyrule to seal him away. The reintroduction of the goddesses, the creation of Hyrule, the sanctions they provide, all of this is important Zelda lore and information that ties back into other games in the series. This was something myself and a lot of others believed wouldn't happen. There was such a staunch commitment of going away from Zelda's histories, for this game to include staple Zelda lore and returning concepts like the Triforce cemented how incredible this game's story was. There's so many references to previous games that it would take all day to list them, but the point remains that there was a deliberate choice to make sure Echoes of Wisdom ate, slept, and breathed pre-existing Zelda lore. This is about as traditional as Zelda narrative can get. Seeking favor from the goddesses in order to defeat the big bad is the Zelda story. The path might be different, but the destination is the same. And that's what makes this game's story so fun. It tells a story we all know too well in a new way that doesn't stray far from the direction that made it successful. It helps too that a lot of this game is a bit of nostalgia bait. Having so many connections to Ocarina of Time with Jabu Jabu, Vivagia, the Deku Tree, Goma, I mean, these are staple, iconic Zelda characters. We Zelda fans love a good callback, probably to our own detriment sometimes, but Echoes of Wisdom is a game that acknowledges them and says, here you go, we brought extra. The decision to cast Zelda as the lead for this title will be one that changes the franchise. It is way past due that we have a true game where we play as the princess. Yes, of course, there's the numerous spin-offs where this is possible, but for a mainline Zelda title, I don't think it's possible to overstate how important this is for the franchise. This has been a huge fan request for many years, and to finally see it come to fruition is nothing short of awesome. I can imagine what this must feel like for all the women and girls who have long waited for a female Link or playable Zelda. I know for me, I was extremely excited about playing as her. Zelda is an iconic character that deserves to be placed in the spotlight as a playable character. I can only assume and hope that Echoes of Wisdom won't be the only time we get to play as her. The shift from Link to Zelda tilts the story on its axis and gives a new perspective to a fairly traditional story. While the goals and objectives are largely the same, having Zelda's perspective with how other characters and the world evolves around her creates a new way of telling these stories. We see a side of the narrative that we haven't seen before. I think Echoes of Wisdom does an excellent job at creating a believable world. This Hyrule is a little different. Some regions don't even know who Zelda is. This game creates a sort of unification of Hyrule by having her go into these areas and solve their problems. Zelda earns the respect and admiration of the other races in Hyrule, not because she's the princess, but due to her actions. I remember thinking, oh, this is weird, the Zora don't know who Zelda is. But I think I like that more, honestly. Where in the Era of the Wild game Zelda was widely known and respected, we get to see Zelda earn her fame in this title. I was a bit sad to see that Link was completely unknown to Zelda, because I feel like having a deeper connection between the characters would have made the call to action all that more interesting. There's definitely a drive to save Link, but this game doesn't do anything in terms of creating a deep bond between the characters like we've seen in previous titles. The gameplay for Echoes of Wisdom revolves mainly around the use of the titular echoes. Echoes are used for puzzle solving, traversal, and combat, all while being flexible in how you can use them. This game seems to focus a lot more heavily on puzzle solving compared to previous Zelda titles, which makes sense given the direction and use of Zelda as the character. The puzzles in this game go from the more traditional dungeon-style solutions to the extremely open-ended problem-solving of modern Zelda. The classic puzzle design mainly shows up in these dungeons, but I think that's a huge part of what makes them unique and feel very traditional, where the more open puzzles take place more frequently in the overworld and still world. These puzzles are more exploration focused and ask the question of how do I get over there, where the dungeon puzzles seem to be more of how can I get that. Both puzzle designs are used well in all areas of the game, but I really like that the dungeons leaned into the more traditional approach. For me, it helps solidify the Zelda feel and further establish the identity of a traditional Zelda game. There's no shortage of echoes in this game, but I did find that I tended to use the same 4 or 5 echoes for just about everything. There's echoes that provide the same function as numerous others, like any of the flying enemies. A lot of the combat-focused echoes, like the monsters you come into contact with, often have more powerful versions that come at a higher cost. So while the amount of echoes is fairly high, the uniqueness for all of them isn't. The echoes-based combat had varying levels of effectiveness for me. I found that a large majority of the echoes just weren't as effective at dealing damage as I'd like them to be. Especially when compared to Sword Fighter mode, the pacing felt painfully slow at times. I know the combat is built around the usage of echoes and is meant to be played this way as an alternative to traditional top-down Zelda combat, but I struggled to be patient with it. It's meant to be a completely different focus on combat rather than just swing your sword, enemy go bye-bye. So I don't want to cast too much judgment on it because of that. It is entirely my preference to fight enemies in the more traditional way. Combat-focused echoes do really excel at providing additional damage, and I think that aspect of them really shines. Going up against a strong combatant and popping down a level 3 echo and entering Sword Fighter mode makes quick work of just about anything you go up against. Sword Fighter mode really made the combat work for me. Having the ability to enter into it and play the game the same way we have for nearly 40 years truly helped balance the pace and engagement of combat. Without it, I fear this would have been an entirely different playing experience and perhaps not a better one. That being said, there are still aspects of the ability that I dislike. For one, it doesn't last very long, and even upgrading the Sword of Might to its highest levels doesn't seem to remedy this. It still depletes pretty quickly, and in the later stages of the game, I found myself running out of sword energy constantly. Again, this could just be a me thing and not planning my smoothies and resources accordingly, but as a baseline, I think it would have been a lot more enjoyable to have Sword Fighter mode last a lot longer. The way you obtain Sword Fighter mode and its subsequent abilities is super cool though. I love that every time we get a new ability, it's through fighting an imposter Link. These were some of the most enjoyable combat-focused segments in the game, and to have Link function as a mini-boss was really cool. Yet another example of using pre-existing Zelda tropes, be it in reference to Dark Link or Puppet Zelda. There's also the abilities of Bind and Reverse Bind. The Bind ability itself is used to a huge degree in this game, with a huge focus on puzzle solving. But to that same degree, I didn't see myself using the Reverse Bind ability hardly at all in this game. Maybe it's the open-ended gameplay design that allows you to choose to use this mechanic at whatever instance you see fit, but I rarely, if ever, used it, and I really hope that's not a case of an underutilized gimmick. I just never found myself in a situation where I thought, this is the thing I need to try right now. I'm sure this could be a wholly unique situation with my specific playthrough, but if it isn't, then I fear this was a huge missed opportunity to implement this mechanic into more areas of the game. Exploring in this game is where the modern Zelda influence really comes to light. Just as the philosophies of Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom revolved around traversing the world any way possible, Echoes does the same. Certain areas in this game are structured in a way where you have to use your echoes to access them. Sometimes it feels like you've clipped through the map into an area you weren't supposed to be in, but all of that is by design. This game was created with the same purpose of free-range exploration, so that each and every player can have a personal playing experience. Albeit the echoes that we've all used seem to fall into a short list of candidates, it was only natural that the most efficient echoes would become the most popular. While overworld exploration had elements of puzzle solving to them, I think the best examples of exploration-based gameplay came in the Still World. Every Still World section offered an inventive and fun challenge to what was basically a pretty simplistic gameplay loop. We've seen this exact mechanic in games like Twilight Princess and Skyward Sword, but Echoes of Wisdom managed to create environments that made you want to seek out every nook and cranny to find Tri's friends. These areas had incentives to complete, and every time you stepped into a new rift, it was a new unfamiliar playground. The Still World, in my eyes, is one of the best examples of what the Zelda team was trying to achieve with the gameplay. There's opportunities to make this a unique gameplay environment for everyone with traversal and combat-focused areas, as well as super creative puzzles that are satisfying to complete. And just like the Still World, the dungeons amplified that same feeling. These are as traditional as Zelda dungeon you can get, and the gameplay reflects that. The structure is the same we've come to know and love, but with the Echoes of Wisdom flair that makes them feel extremely fresh while utilizing the tried and true methods of the past. Just like in Tears of the Kingdom, certain sections had lead-ups to the dungeons that felt as though they were a part of the dungeon itself, namely the Still World section leading to Jabul Ruins. Now this was the dungeon I went to first, so maybe my opinion is swayed by it being my initial experience, but I think this area is so well done and made for an extremely fun and engaging section of the game. I felt this Still World segment was good enough to be a dungeon replacement, but it was just the appetizer. On the other hand, some of the later dungeons I found to be a little inconsistent. Faron Temple was a huge sprawling dungeon with a ton of areas to explore. This was the first of the final 3 dungeons I completed, so I had the impression that the remaining 2 would follow suit and be as large and intricate. But I was shocked when I got to Elden Temple and found it to be significantly smaller in scale. Even worse, the exciting boss fight with Volvagia turned out to be fairly boring and easier than I'd have liked. The Goma boss fight I found very captivating, and I thought it made very good use of the game mechanics. But with Volvagia, it seemed a lot more one-dimensional. I would have liked to see this specific dungeon get a little bit more love and have a more interesting boss fight. Volvagia deserves as much. Probably the aspect I enjoyed the most about Echoes of Wisdom was its charm. This game wore its identity on its sleeve and wasn't afraid to declare itself a Zelda game. Some can argue that this game relies too heavily on past Zelda tropes and characters, but I think that's what makes this game so incredible. Echoes deliberately went out of its way to acknowledge aspects of the Zelda series a lot of us dedicated fans felt were thrown to the wayside. There's so much Ocarina of Time influence in this game, and every single time I saw a familiar face, it made me smile like an idiot. The graphical design lended itself so well to the established races and characters of Zelda and gave them personality, especially the sections with the Zora. The whole storyline here had me connected and invested in these characters. Drag and Kushara had a storyline that, despite being a little cliche, still made me feel emotionally attached to them. I love seeing them come together for the betterment of their peoples by setting aside their own egos. Other characters like Khan gave this game a deep emotional story that's easy to relate to and only makes you want to see the best for him. This game does an excellent job at connecting the player to the world. Presenting all the races across Hyrule as cute and endearing people does an excellent job at making the player want to save them. The amount of references to past Zelda games are everywhere and is just another part of what gives this game its identity. The lore pertaining to the goddesses, the numerous characters, the little details and Easter eggs, returning staples like heart containers instead of shrine rewards, the music. My god, the music. I cannot begin to tell you how impactful the soundtrack was on me. It very well could be one of my favorites in the entire series. The use of musical callbacks like at Hyrule Ranch and the first time we hear Zelda's Lullaby as part of the overworld theme did so much to captivate me. They actually made me emotional. Music, I feel, can often be overlooked as a narrative device. Using Zelda's Lullaby did as much to say this is Zelda's adventure as any other aspect of this game. There's so much attention to detail with all the callbacks in this game. This is one of those things where I feel like you just have to experience it to really know. The Zelda fans that have played a lot of the other games, you'll know what these moments are and how impactful they can be. Entire sections of this game, like the final boss fight with Link and Zelda fighting together, just feel so right. I don't know how to properly explain it. This game just has so much in it that makes me happy. As with any game though, there are aspects of it that I think miss the mark. I said before that the echoes weren't as effective as I would have preferred combat-wise, but I didn't mention the automatons. I used them a couple times and felt like they truly weren't worth the time to crank them. The damage they seemed to deal out was negligible, and I just feel like they weren't anything to write home about. But what made them really unremarkable for me was just how late in the game I got them, and how tedious the questline to obtain them was. Granted, I enjoyed the quests themselves to get the items for their creation, but it was a bit arduous to get them all at once. I imagine if I had found Dompe earlier and progressed the questline in a more spaced out manner, it would have been more enjoyable, but sadly I found them pretty much before going to the Eternal Forest. Speaking of, the Deku Tree should have been featured more. I felt like they decided to just shoehorn him in at the very end of the game. I would have loved to see more of the Deku Tree and have him play a more prominent role in this game. To that same end, our new final boss Null was also a little underwhelming. The lore dump for Null being sealed off by the goddesses is super cool and has so many implications, but sadly Null kinda turned out to be a fairly bland villain. I know not to expect a multifaceted, intricate villain, but it would have been cool to have more information on Null and its motives besides returning everything to darkness. Null using Imposter Zelda though was pretty cool, so I can't be too mad about it. There were neat moments for sure. Then there's a few obvious quality of life things that would just make this a more enjoyable playing experience. The Echoes menu is atrocious and takes way too long to sort through. This UI is starting to feel very dated, and I think the next Zelda title needs to move on from it. Changing your accessories was also a little tedious for no good reason. I think it's silly that I have to remove what I'm currently wearing in order to put on a new item. Just swap them. You can do that with the outfits. It's just a needless extra step. Asking me if I think a Zelda game is good is like asking if water's wet. There's an obvious bias here, but I truly try my best to look past my excitement to find what makes these games worth trying. Echoes of Wisdom is yet another triumphant accomplishment by the Zelda team. In an age where so much of what makes a Zelda game is questioned, Echoes of Wisdom is here to remind us that a perfect balance can be struck with the two design philosophies they've established. This game is a monumental success for the future of the series, not only because of its ability to effortlessly blend the old and new, but also because it's shown a renewed interest in top-down 2D Zelda, an interest that hopefully means more games created in this style. The 3D titles are the claim to fame for the series, but that doesn't mean there's not a place and audience for this style as well. To that same degree, this should be enough proof that playable Zelda not only works, but works better than we could ever imagine. There's no excuse going forward where we shouldn't get more titles with Zelda as our main protagonist. This is a game that will appeal to all types of Zelda players, and there's absolutely zero reason you shouldn't play it. It is with the utmost enthusiasm that I recommend The Legend of Zelda: Echoes of Wisdom. And that's Echoes of Wisdom in the books. Thank you guys so much for watching all the way to the end of the review. I hope you guys enjoyed Echoes of Wisdom. I think this is an incredible Zelda game, and it makes me very excited. about the future of the series and the prospect of playing as Zelda again. So I hope you guys liked it. I hope you guys liked Echoes of Wisdom. And yeah, let me know what you guys think. What did you like or what did you hate about Echoes of Wisdom? I think there's going to be a lot of interesting topics to come out about this game. And if there's any ideas or topics you guys would like to see me to discuss in the future, please let me know. I would love to consider it. But that's going to do it for the video. Thank you guys so much for watching. And if you haven't already, please subscribe if you would like to see more Zelda and Echoes of Wisdom content. Also consider becoming a channel member. There should be a little button over here somewhere. Becoming a channel member allows you to have exclusive perks to the channel, like Korok icons and these emotes that you can toss around in the comments section and during live streams. Thank you for those of you who have become channel members already. But that's going to be the video. Thank you guys so much for tuning in once again. And until next time, I will see you in the next one.